everyone, my name is Bhavya Suri and I'm the health educator for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. Before we start today's webinar, I'd like to take a minute of your time and introduce this year's National MS Education and Awareness Month Toolkit, right here. The theme for 2023 is MS in Today's World. If you are currently subscribed to our quarterly MS Focus magazine, please be on the lookout to receive your 2023 toolkit in the next few weeks. If you are not subscribed with us, please respond to your registration or reminder email of this webinar, and we can add you to our mailing list. This toolkit has different activities such as checklists and worksheets that can assist in keeping you grounded, but also finding new ways to prepare you for the upcoming future of MS. There's topics in here to guide you in your personal journey of living with MS, healthcare tips such as how to advocate for yourself, or the latest updates on FDA-approved treatments, and how to navigate within your MS community. To make this toolkit and today's webinar possible, I would like to thank our sponsors, Biogen, Genentech, EMD Serono, Sanofi, Biotis, Sandoz, and Bristol Myers Squibb for their support of this program. And now I am delighted to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. We have Giuseppe Randazzo, who is the Vice President of Sciences and Regulatory Affairs at the Association for Accessible Medicines and the Biosimilars Council, Sarah Ikenberry, Senior Communication Advisor for the Office of Therapeutic Biologics and Biosimilars in the Food and Drug Administration, for Center for Evaluation and for Research, and Craig Burton, Executive Director of the Biosimilars Council and Senior Vice President of Policy and Strategic Alliances for the Association for Accessible Medicine, who will be talking to us today about biosimilar therapies and what you need to know about them. After the presentation from our lovely panelists, we'll open it up to your questions and comments. We're very pleased to have them join us and present this important topic. Thank you all for being here, and I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I appreciate that warm welcome. I'm going to share my screen and then get this slide going. So thank you all for joining us and for the opportunity to speak to you today about biosimilar medications. So I'm going to go through what I hope are all the basics that you need to know about these medications. And so to start with, we have biosimilars. They're a type of biologic medication. They're safe and effective for the treatment of many chronic and severe conditions. And these icons kind of show what we have approved biosimilars for today, including chronic skin diseases like psoriasis, bowel diseases like Crohn's and colitis, diabetes, macular degeneration, arthritis, kidney conditions, and cancers such as breast, lung, and colon. But what are they? So a biosimilar medication is an FDA-approved biologic medication that is very similar but not identical to an original biologic medication, or maybe you would refer to that as a brand medication. We also, in our regulatory speak at FDA, call them reference products, but for the benefit of everyone here today, we're just going to say original biologic. So biosimilars have no clinically meaningful differences from the original biologic. This means you can expect the same safety and efficacy from the biosimilar over the course of treatment as you would from the original biologic. And biosimilars are made from the same type of sources like living cells or microorganisms and are just as safe and effective. They provide the same treatment benefits, are given at the same strength and dosage, and they're not expected to cause new or worsening side effects. And so I'm going to actually go back up a little bit and tell you what biologic medications are, since biosimilars are a biologic medication. They're medicines that are made in or from natural and living sources like animal cells and microorganisms such as bacteria and yeast. And so biologic medications are usually more complex than other drugs like aspirin, and they're more complicated to make because of this. And so one way to think about this is like a recipe for making bread, or if you make beer, or like wine, it's kind of a similar premise that, these are similar to two loaves of bread if they were made with the same recipe that includes yeast, which is a living source. And so no one loaf is an exact copy of another one, but they're all the same type of bread. And so the same is true for biologic. Each batch of a biologic medication is made with a mix of ingredients that include living sources. And because living sources naturally have slight variations, each batch is not an exact copy, but each batch provides the same treatment benefits. And I just want to reiterate that that's true from the original biologic and for the biosimilar. So, okay. So, should you be worried that they are biosimilars and they're not identical to the original biologic? The short answer is no. Again, because they're made from these living sources, it is normal for both a biosimilar and original biologic to have minor differences between batches of the same medication. And this is why they are called biosimilars and why they aren't identical. The original biologic has these same normal and expected variations, and the biosimilar matches these variations. And the biosimilar approval process is extremely rigorous. And as part of that process, FDA reviews the differences between the original biologic and the biosimilar to ensure that they are as safe and effective as the original biologic. And again, that means they'll provide the same treatment benefit and risks as the original biologic it was compared to. Another common question we get is, are biosimilars the same as generic drugs? And so the short answer is that they're like generics in some ways, but they're different in others. So they both are types of medications that are compared to the original or brand product for approval. So they are both versions of previously FDA approved medications. And the whole hope is that they may offer more affordable treatment options to patients. The reason why one is a biosimilar and one is a generic is because they are approved through different regulatory pathways, but they both avoid duplicating certain costly clinical trials. And so both of the products go through rigorous review, but there's differences. Biosimilars and the original biologic are made from the natural and living ingredients, and generics are and the brand are made from chemical ingredients. The chemical ingredients can be more easily copied, whereas natural and living sources cannot be exactly copied. There are some less complicated biologics that can be, but for the most part, they can't be exactly copied. And so the information needed to demonstrate that a biologic is biosimilar to another biologic can be much more extensive than what is needed for a generic to prove that they are a copy of a brand. So this slide shows some of the information that FDA reviews to ensure that biosimilars are safe and effective treatment options. We review data, studies, and tests. A lot of it is analytically based to ensure or to decide whether a biosimilar meets the FDA's high standards for approval. And we also ensure that manufacturers show that there are no differences in side effects, including that the side effects of the biosimilar are not more frequent or severe than those of the original biologic. Biosimilars also undergo the same robust quality assessment that the original biologic goes through. But will biosimilars save you money? So the intent of the program is that they do save you money. And we know that biologics are often very expensive and can be unaffordable, especially for people using several medications. The goal of biosimilars is to offer more access to treatments at a lower cost. And biosimilars are approved by relying on FDA's finding that the original biologic is safe and effective. And as discussed in the previous slide, they don't have to repeat these costly clinical trials. So the biosimilars theoretically cost less to make. The hope is that the lower cost will save patients money and the biosimilars will be covered by more insurance companies. I have to say, though, that FDA doesn't have input into the cost of drugs, and coverage and reimbursement can depend on many factors, such as your insurance plan, the formulary coverage, but you can always check with your insurance provider to find out what's included in your plan, or if you're covered by Medicare or Medicaid, CMS and plan providers have that information. And why would a patient switch to a biosimilar? So if you're currently using a biologic and you're concerned about cost, you and your health care provider may want to talk about switching to a biosimilar. You may also be switched based on your health insurance coverage. And in addition, there are biosimilars called interchangeable biosimilars that can be substituted by the pharmacist for the original biologic. So I'm going to go over what that means. So what are interchangeable biosimilars? An interchangeable biosimilar is a biosimilar that may be substituted without consulting the prescriber because it meets additional requirements related to the potential for automatic substitution. And this is subject to state laws. And so this is what it would look like. If your doctor would give you a prescription and you would go to the pharmacy to fill it, and the pharmacist could give you the brand or original biologic, or they could give you the interchangeable biosimilar. And so this is similar to how generics are substituted for brand names at the pharmacy, but not all biosimilars are interchangeable. Companies must request approval as an interchangeable biosimilar specifically. And what is the difference between a biosimilar and interchangeable biosimilar? Because that is a very common question we get, and it's very confusing. But scientifically and clinically, nothing is different. A biosimilar and interchangeable biosimilar both must meet the same requirements for showing that they are highly similar to and have no clinically meaningful differences from a biologic already approved by the FDA. The law that governs biosimilars states that if a biosimilar is automatically substituted at the pharmacy, it has to be determined to be an interchangeable biosimilar. Therefore, they apply as one, and there might be, but not, they don't have to. And there may be reasons why a company may not seek this status, such as business reasons, or because the medication is administered in a hospital or outpatient clinic, and you could not even get it at your local pharmacy. And well, actually, I'm going to go back for just a second and stay on the slide, because another kind of question that I want to answer that you may have is if you should wait for a biosimilar to be approved as an interchangeable to use it. And that is no. Both biosimilars and interchangeables meet the same high standard, and both can be used in place of the original biologic. One of the differences is that the doctor generally has to prescribe a biosimilar for you to be dispensed it at the pharmacy versus the interchangeable, which could just be automatically substituted. But as with all treatment decisions, you should talk to your healthcare providers and check other trusted sources of information, to learn more about the options that are available to you. And currently, there are no approved biosimilars to treat multiple sclerosis, but brands such as Tysabri are coming off patent and will be open to biosimilar competition this year. And so I'm just going to quickly go over some of the resources FDA has available in case you or you want to learn more about this for you or a family member. So we have the Purple Book, and this is a database that provides the public, including healthcare providers, with an online search engine with information about all FDA approved biological products. It includes reference or original, biosimilar, and interchangeable. And you can find information in here that to meet the needs of a variety of users. So there's a simple and advanced search options, there's glossary of terms, links to product labels, and the ability to search, filter, and sort information. There's also a user guide that provides descriptions and specific instructions on how to navigate and use all the functionality in the simple and advanced search. We have a lot of resources for prescribers, including fact sheets, videos, infographics, and continuing education courses through Medscape. We also have a biosimilar curriculum toolkit that was designed to educate students in healthcare professional degree programs like nursing, physician assistant, pharmacy, and medical school, to provide these educational resources to apply and teach concepts related to biosimilars. And it's modular, and there's a level 1 and a level 2. So there's a foundational level and then a more in-depth scientific and regulatory level. We also work with a lot of stakeholders like MS Focus. We're happy to be here. But we also work with other stakeholders to develop materials like the USP, so the United States Pharmacopoeia, and the Federal Trade Commission. And then we also have a variety of resources for patients. We just released 2 fact sheets and a new infographic, and we're having a video out soon, but all of this can be found on our website at fda.gov/biosimilars. And I just want to thank you very much for your attention. And then I'm going to stop sharing if I can figure it out. And there we go. And I think it's to Craig now.
Thanks, Sarah. That was a great presentation, and I'm going to see if I can successfully navigate technology as well and share some slides here. So I just have a couple slides. I'll make a couple high level remarks, and then I'll hand it over to my colleague Giuseppe Randazzo. So just as context, as folks mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Biosimilars Council, which is a division of AAM. We are a trade association that works to ensure positive reimbursement, coverage, environment for biosimilar products. We do a lot of work to educate around the safety and effectiveness and lower costs of biosimilars. We have 9 member companies who are all focused specifically on biosimilars, recognizing that this is a relatively new and unknown space, and that there was a need and opportunity to partner with other groups out there who are dedicated to expanding patient access to lower cost medicines.
Hey,
So,
Craig. Hey, Craig,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I know you're in the flow, but there was a request to press F5 or try to, if you can, have one slide on the screen. It's possible.
Oh, is it showing them all?
Yeah, you F5, my friend.
Mhm.
Let's see. Hang on. We'll try this again. Sorry about this. This is what happens when G makes me do technology on the fly. So we'll try. All right, is that any better? I don't know if I can do full screen, but we'll.
You can.
That's better, Craig.
There's a button at the bottom, but that's perfect. There's a
We'll
slide.
make that work. That's great. So what I'll just make a couple comments here and really focus on is the value that biosimilars are delivering to patients. Today we have 40 biosimilars on the market are approved. 27 of those are on the market. Those are across a number of conditions, including rheumatology, autoimmune conditions, cancer, as well as cancer supportive care treatments. And they're consistently now coming in at lower prices and delivering savings, with $13 billion in savings since 2015. But the stat that I am most excited about on this slide here speaks to what they have meant in terms of patient therapy. So the 2 aspects here, and Sarah talked about the safety of biosimilars, and FDA really is the gold standard worldwide when it comes to drug review and approval. And we're now seeing that safety borne out by real world patient experience. This is some data that we put together a year ago, and at that point in the US, we had seen biosimilars used in more than 364 million days of patient therapy, with no differences in their safety and efficacy. But importantly, that included 150 million days of therapy that otherwise would not have occurred. This means that not just that patients are getting biosimilars, but patients are getting biosimilars who otherwise would not have received medical treatment with these products. And then, speaking to the costs, these are meaningfully lower cost options. The average biosimilar today costs more than 50% less than their brand drug did when they launched. That means savings for payers. It means savings, or it can mean savings for patients. As Sarah mentioned, sometimes that depends on how health plan formularies are constructed, but it is certainly an opportunity to ensure that those savings are translating to patients in terms of lower costs at the end of the day. I'll leave you with kind of one last bit and then hand to my colleague. I do want to highlight a resource that the Biosimilars Council has launched in the last year. As I mentioned, we do a lot of work in the policy space, but we're also doing a lot of work around biosimilar education, and both working with partner groups, anyone who is interested in expanding knowledge and awareness of biosimilars. Doing a lot of work with patient groups. And last year we launched the Biosimilars Patient Resource Center, which is biosimilarsresources.org. This is a website that is intended to give patients and caregivers a simple and easily navigated resource to learn more about biosimilars. It includes the most useful and up-to-date resources, both from the Biosimilars Council that we put out, but also from other trusted partners and experts who we work with, including the FDA, including patient groups and physicians. It also includes patient testimonials and gives an opportunity for patients who have used or are using biosimilars to record and upload their own story about their experience with biosimilars and the value that they found through use of those biosimilars. At the end of the day, we believe that this website gives visitors a complete view of what biosimilars are, how they help patients, and the savings that they provide. And it also includes a toolkit to help people share those resources within their network or with their loved ones. So a lot of, at the end of the day, these are safe, effective, and lower cost options that really do have an opportunity to expand overall patient access to care. And I'm going to pause and hand it back to Giuseppe to kind of bring us home and talk a little bit more about the science behind biosimilars.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for everyone for having us. A great job. In preparing for this, we had some questions, and I thought I would do kind of what Sarah did as far as some of the questions that she's faced and been asked in the past. And I just have a few to go over. Sarah did a really good job in explaining the large majority of the basics. So I'll get into a few additional things, and some are kind of nerdy, so bear with me, but I won't get too far in depth. And I'll make it simple because my son, who's currently taking, he's 14, but he has some biology he's been getting into. And I bored him while I was preparing for this. I bored him with this little brief explanation. So bear with me here. One of the questions we sometimes get, and I got it years ago when I was with the FDA, is like, what are some things that take into consideration? What does the FDA take into consideration, specifically in this case, when they're looking at a biosimilar drug? And there's a few things, and a couple of things to keep it really simple. One main thing is structure and function, right? How does it look and how does it perform? Okay, that's one thing. And they use analytics as well as with some clinical studies to determine all this. They look at something called clinical pharmacology. To keep that simple, they just want to make sure it's working the same way as what Sarah called it, the original biologic, or in FDA speak, in regulatory speak, reference product. They also look at the clinical efficacy and safety. When you think of the word efficacy, it just doesn't work, which it does, and safety. They also look at something, a weird word called immunogenicity, if you've heard of it. That just means they have to demonstrate that it doesn't cause an immune response that would be different from the reference product. And finally, two last things, they have to make sure, and this is very integral for the FDA, they have to make sure the manufacturing process is robust. And actually, the FDA does a really good job, speaking from my heart here, they do a really good job in going to those facilities while the actual product is being produced. So that's a very unique thing about biologics, too, so you guys are aware. Much like many of you guys and myself and others probably take some generic products, which of course also are high quality. The one difference when they inspect the manufacturing facilities for biologics is they must actually be producing that specific product when they inspect. So the FDA has a really good idea of how robust the manufacturing facility is and how robust the process is. And finally, of course, they look at what's the reference is referred to as the labeling. That's one thing, and that's kind of at a high level what they look at. Couple other things. We saw a question already that says, can a pharmacist tell you, is in the chat, can a pharmacist tell you that there's a biosimilar, it's a biosimilar, or there's one approved? In fact, the second question in the chat, is there a biosimilar currently approved for MS? And as far as a biologic, no, there is not, to my knowledge, unless others know. To my knowledge, no. However, there are some in the works, and theoretically, as far as some intelligence shows, there might be one on the market fairly soon. And the one question also was, can a pharmacist tell you again a biosimilar is approved and on the market? And that answer is yes. So if it's a biosimilar is approved and the pharmacist tells you that it's approved and there's a biosimilar on the market, you can actually go to your doctor, communicate with your doctor, whether however you do it, telemedicine, phone, etc., and they can actually write you for the biosimilar, which theoretically and hopefully for patients can save you substantially amount of money. And one last thing I jotted down. Oh yeah, I wanted to iterate something that Sarah talked about as far as biosimilars versus interchangeability. And I used some of the language in looking this up and doing my research as far as when you talk about biosimilarity and interchangeability. I think it's important to know that there are no differences in safety and efficacy and quality. They're the same standard. When FDA looks at something and approves it for biosimilarity, or they actually deem something interchangeable, the interchangeable piece has to come at the request of an applicant. And like Sarah said, and did so very well, not every applicant will even request interchangeability because it may not make sense. But the product itself, and there's been some confusion out there, so we try to set the story straight. Some people think because it's biosimilar interchangeable, that interchangeable is better. That's in fact not the case at all. They are of high quality, same safety, and just as efficacious. All interchangeability is, again, Sarah mentioned, was just so the pharmacist can just replace it or use that biosimilar that's interchangeable versus having to go back to your doctor. But when it comes to quality, safety, efficacy, absolutely the same product. I think that's my high. Oh, one last thing I want to tell you before we take any questions is, from our perspective and from the work we've done working with the FDA and others, our members as well as biosimilar manufacturers, in general, patients who start on a biosimilar, whether you start fresh on a biosimilar or you transition from a reference product to a biosimilar, you can expect the same safety, same efficacy. It will be effective, and you can see the same high quality product you get from the reference product. And I will be honest, of course, as Sarah, you should expect the same side effects. The side effect profile are generally the same as well. But in general, you can be safe that FDA holds us to a high degree of standard, and those are very, very good products. I'll stop there. I have more, but I'll stop and take questions.
Well, thank you all. This was very informative with each of you presenting different information. So now we're ready for the questions. If you have a question or comment, you can ask it by using the Q&A button in the app. It allows you to send your questions anonymously if you choose to do so. You can also ask your questions live by raising your hand. If you want to, you can click the raise hand button or press *9 if you're on the phone. I will call on you and then you can unmute and ask your questions. So I think we have one in Q&A already. If a biosimilar doesn't have clinical trials, how can you know it will work the same as the named biological drug?
Sure.
So I can start a little bit. So and Giuseppe went over, pretty well, like the range of testing that's required, and the base testing for biosimilar is analytical, and it's highly sensitive, and can tell, whether or not there's differences. And so what they're testing is product from the originator or brand company, and then product from the biosimilar company, and they're comparing them. And so the brand company's already done all of these extensive clinical trials. And so the biosimilar just has to show that they're highly similar and with no clinically meaningful differences. And so that's what they do through analytical testing, pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic testing. Giuseppe went over some of that. It's how it works, how it goes through the body. And then sometimes they do clinical studies. They're just not called clinical trials. They're not these large scale clinical trials. Gee, you might can talk a little bit more about some of the studies.
No, you nailed the last part really well, Sarah. Thank you. It's important to note that, when Sarah was talking about biosimilars and she mentioned generics, there is a slight difference on the generic small molecule world, because they're such small molecules, generics, they don't do any clinical trials. But on the biosimilar side, to the question, Sarah nailed it, is they do clinical studies. So the idea here, it may not be as robust with as many people as far as a reference product, but they most certainly do clinical trials, comparative clinical trials as well, to make sure, once again, I mentioned structure and function, that they're the same. So they do clinical trials. And once it is approved, they will follow that product as well to make sure it's continuing to do what it's supposed to be doing. So there are clinical trials done, but again, not nearly as many patients per se, but clinical trials are done on the biosimilar side.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat. Bruce is asking, do insurance companies have to cover the biosimilars?
So I'll take that. The answer is no. And what we've seen so far is that some insurance companies cover biosimilars very quickly and encourage their use, and others are slower to cover them. Often that comes down to completely unrelated issues like contracting and the insurance company's own internal strategy. But we've seen insurance companies and providers who have gone all in on biosimilars and have come back later and assessed both the cost savings and the safety and efficacy, and found that there was no difference, and that they were able to generate meaningful savings for patients and the payer through biosimilars.
Thank you. So we have somebody who raised their hand, and I'm going to allow Kathleen to talk and ask her question. Kathleen, can you hear us? If so, you are muted right now. I'll give her a few seconds to see if she can mute herself. Kathleen, are you there? We'll come back to her. Let's see. There's a question asking, I heard that biosimilars are required to be between 85% and 125% efficacy of the brand name. It doesn't seem like you would want to interchange biosimilars. Perhaps pick one and keep with it. What do you think?
G, do you want to take that range, that statistical range thing?
Sure, I could start that. In fact, what you're quoting there, an 85% to 125% or 80 to 20, 120. That's actually more on the small molecule generic side. And what they do is they look at the bioequivalence and make sure their bioequivalence within that range. You see a little kind of curve, bell curve, and they make sure it's within that range. So for biosimilars, dare I say, it's probably even more precise than that. I don't want to get the exact numbers, but yeah, so the numbers you're hearing, that's more on the generic small molecule side, which again still can be trusted, but this biosimilars, it's a little different. And again, they do more. There's more analytical data as well as clinical data on the biosimilar side when you're trying to equate it, for lack of a better term, back to the reference product than on the generic side. Sarah, anything to add?
No, I think that's absolutely right.
Thank you. If I start a biosimilar and want to go back on name brand, could it be a problem for my body?
It shouldn't be a problem for your body. You would definitely want to talk to your healthcare provider, to make sure that it's available and that they're, also on board with that. But there should be no problem. It should basically be like taking the brand biologic.
Thank you. How have insurance companies been adopting them to their formulary?
So some I think the question here is where have they been placing them? Typically, they place them on the same formulary tier as the brand product. So what that often means is that they will have co-insurance. Some plans, again, it's going to vary wildly depending on the plan you're talking about. Some formularies are going to put the biosimilars right next to the brand on the same formulary tier with the same level of co-insurance. Other insurance companies are adopting the biosimilar instead of the branded drug. So that's one to look at your insurer and how they're constructing their formulary to understand better.
Thank you. This is a question from Anonymous. Considering that MS patients don't take live vaccines, how would this differ in terms of it having a live component?
G can probably respond to this, but not all vaccines are living vaccines. Some of them are with dormant. I'm not sure of the exact terminology, but the biologics that would be used are not like, there's not, the living substance isn't still like alive or whatever. It's just derived from it or made in it. I don't know, G, if you're able to explain that better.
Yeah, it's typically how they're manufactured, what they're manufactured in. So some of the vaccines historically might be manufactured in an egg, right? So as far as there's living organisms. And I think the best and the easiest way to do this and to answer the question is like really work with your medical professional.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on a product now, if you're on a biologic now, for example, like Tisabri, right? If you're on a product, then without question, if you're on that product and you're faring well on that, if and when, it should be when, a biosimilar is approved, work with your medical professional and see if it's the right choice for you. Because if you can take that biologic, you'll be able to take of course, the biologic or the biosimilar as well. But I would certainly work with your medical professional, your physician.
Thank you. So to kind of jump off of what you just said, Giuseppe, when should we expect to see biosimilars such as Tisabri per MS come on the market?
I don't know. Because I don't work for the company who's looking at. Craig's smiling. He might have an idea. Theoretically, there could be an approval. There could be an approval this year for a biosimilar product with the biosimilar to the reference product Tisabri. There could be this year, but I don't have an exact date. I no longer work at the FDA, nor could they tell you anyway. Sarah couldn't tell you anyway. Shouldn't be permitted. But my understanding is there's products in the works. FDA might even be looking at it right now. So potentially this year, if not, most likely next year. That being said, I go back to Craig's point, if he wants to add, that doesn't mean it will necessarily 100% be available because of insurance reasons. But that, again, I defer to Craig on that.
That was beautifully said. G has my job from now on.
It was beautifully said. I agree. So next question, do biosimilars contain all ingredients or just the primary ingredient is the same? Could a preservative be different?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Great question. Much like on the generic side, once again, there's certain what they call excipients or other products in the finished. So the finished product we all take as patients is called a drug product. The actual stuff that does the work, the pharmacology work, is called the drug substance. So the drug product has the active ingredient, if you will, and other excipients. So yeah, it can be slightly different, but it won't be whole scale different because you have to be in a certain ranges. And once again, all the testing that's done, they still make sure whatever's in their product, while it can be slightly different, is still safe, efficacious, and of high quality.
Yeah, and anything that's different will be like clinically inactive. It won't be anything that impacts the clinical like safety or efficacy of the product or how it works.
Okay, thank you. Another question I personally had. So Sarah, you mentioned how medical providers, nurses, PAs, and MDs have to take possibly this course to learn about biosimilars. And one of the questions asked earlier in this presentation was if pharmacists will know that there is a biosimilar out for the drug that the physician is prescribing the patient. So is there some type of relation where a patient can go back to a physician and they already know the biosimilar out?
So I think I have some things to clarify. First of all, the course that we have is not required. We have lots of courses available, but we are finding in our research that there's a lack of knowledge among all healthcare providers, some more than others. And you know, they're not really necessarily aware of what biosimilars are. There's no required questions on any of the medical school, pharmacy school, nursing school tests. And therefore a lot of the schools, what we're finding is a lot of the schools aren't covering it because they have to, you know, teach to the test, quote unquote. However, we are working to provide these resources and to kind of impress the importance upon them about knowing about these products because you know, like right now we're doing this, we're in advance of the availability of a multiple sclerosis biosimilar, but that's so that we can start educating people before they actually have to know about it. And our hopes is that, you know, more and more people will be aware, will be knowledgeable, so that when you ask your pharmacist, they're not going, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, so patients, you know, you definitely should talk to your healthcare providers, but you can also do, you know, your own research and check on the Purple Book. Like I said, that's the FDA database of the licensed products. So any product that is FDA approved will be on the Purple Book or in the Purple Book. And so if it's not in there, it's not approved. And so that is one way that you can find out about it, and you can point your pharmacist and physicians to those resources as well.
Thank you. That was very well said. I don't think we have any other questions. Going once, going twice, no, nothing. So if you guys have any comments you'd like to say before we wrap up this webinar, anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, no, just thank you for the opportunity. I'm available for questions, like if you send them through to Bhavia or through MS Focus, you know, I'm happy to answer them. You know, we just want you all to know that, like Giuseppe was saying, you know, FDA, we are doing a lot to ensure the safety and efficacy of these products, and we're doing a lot to ensure that people are educated and that they know the facts. There's a lot of room for misunderstanding and misperceptions to be spread about biosimilars, and we're trying to kind of nip that in the bud. So you know, I hope you will take this information and read it and not, you know, feel too worried if you do get a biosimilar.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat. I believe Bruce is asking, if there will be biosimilars for infusions like Ocrevus as well, or is it just Tysabri for now? And Bruce, you can clarify if I'm asking the wrong thing.
Well, some biosimilars that are available are infusions. They're a variety of different presentations that they come in, but I'm not really certain about Ocrevus or when that drug is off patent. Generally, the way this works is that these can't be approved until the patents have expired, and so the companies time things to apply for FDA approval to align with that. And Craig can probably speak more on that aspect of it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, and it looks like a question just popped up asking about, for a biosimilar to come to market, what that entails. So I would say on the question about infusions like Ocrevus, as Sarah said, biosimilars can be infusions. I don't know the details in terms of that drug and whether the form, etc. So I won't speak to that. For a biosimilar to come to market, a couple things have to occur, and the big issue there is patent life. As Sarah mentioned, FDA is only dealing with the approval of the product and not whether it has successfully navigated any patent barriers to launch. As I don't know if folks recall, as I was walking through the slides today, there are 40 biosimilars approved, 27 of which are on the market. Now that lag, that delta of 13 products is tied to biosimilars that have been approved, but have not yet successfully navigated the patent hurdles. So a good number of those will come on the market this year. So of those 13 that are not on the market, we expect roughly 8 of those to launch later this year, as they've agreed to settlements that will allow their entry. So that's going to vary by product, depending on whether they're successful in patent litigation, whether they're able to reach a settlement agreement that allows them to come to market earlier, or whether some products are able to come to market earlier, some lose in patent litigation and have to wait.
Yeah, it looks like Bruce also has a question about rituximab. There are rituximab biosimilars approved. We don't comment on the practice of medicine and whether or not your doctor or prescriber uses that off patent, but there are rituximabs available on the market that are being used for cancer treatment and I guess other things.
I think, yes, you answered his question because he was asking about patent meds. And thank you, Craig, for answering the other question as well regarding the procedure of how to get it patented. Well, I believe that is it, unless anybody has any other questions. I don't want to deprive them of this time. No, I don't see anything unless something pops up. Well, that brings us to the end of our time. If you missed any part of this conference, it has been recorded and will be available through the MS Focus Facebook and YouTube channels. Please reply to your registration email for information on how to access the recordings or sign up for our newsletter to learn about upcoming events. Our next teleconference will be this Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, where we will be joining Nicole Goebel in discussing caring for your loved ones and for yourself. Once again, we'd like to thank Biogen, Genentech, EMD Serono, Sanofi, Beatrice, Sandoz, and Bristol Myers Squibb for their support of this program. Our sincere thanks to all our attendees for your participation, and especially to our panelists. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days to help educate us all and share this information with us. We really appreciate it. And for our attendees, if each of you can please fill out our post-event survey, which will be available as soon as you leave this conference, we'd appreciate that too. Your participation in the survey helps us conduct these meaningful programs for the MS community. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, our panelists. Oh, do I see something? Oh, I just see thank yous. And thank you all for your time and sharing this information. We look forward to seeing all of you next time. Have a great day.
Bye,
Thank
thank
you all.
you.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.